Good morning, everyone. I'm going to try and cut this a little bit shorter than I usually do, so let's get right to it. Today, we're going to be reading from Luke chapter 17, verse 11 through 19. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." Let's unpack that a little bit. So we see here that Jesus is traveling along. He's met by 10 men who have leprosy, and they cry from afar off. They stand far away. They're standing at the prescribed distance because they have leprosy. They have to stay out. They're outcast from everyone. I've talked about this before. These poor guys, they get a disease, and all of a sudden they have to be cut off from everyone, all society. They're cut off from their own families, all of their friends, their business. Forget about it. It's over. They have to live basically only on the kindness of people, I guess, throwing them food or something. Honestly, I'm not sure how they got their food. But they would do this pretty much until their bodies fell apart. And then they would die alone. So oftentimes they would group together, as these 10 men did, and they would, travel about, ding, 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 unclean. They're ringing bells so that people wouldn't come too close. Unclean. And these guys are standing afar off, and they recognize Jesus. So apparently they knew something about Jesus. They knew his name. They called him Master, or in some translations, Rabbi. So they knew that he was a powerful teacher of God's word. And they also knew that he had, I guess, some ability to heal their leprosy. Otherwise, they wouldn't have asked, Hey, they're standing far off. "Hey, Jesus, Master, Rabbi, help us." Now, Jesus sees them, and of course, he knows all men's hearts. And these guys, they see Jesus, and they're desperate. They're in this desperate situation. They're desperate for healing. And that's what they really want. And it's amazing because what follows in the story shows that at least 9 out of the 10 of them, while they were calling out for Jesus, they still thought of him they thought of him only as a physical healer, right? So they're asking him to heal them, but that's all they're asking. And that's all they're hoping to receive. Now, in spite of this, I suppose you could call it low, I'm not real sure what the words I'm looking for here, but this kind of unpolished, coarse faith that's, I guess, imperfect and unfinished. That's still not a great word because we're all unfinished. But the idea is that these guys, they only are asking for physical healing. They just want Jesus to solve their problems. And in spite of their faith being so small, Jesus still is able to look on them with mercy. I like the way Alexander MacLaren puts it. He was a 19th century Scottish preacher, and he said Jesus' heart, his heart of mercy flowed out into them, even though they were, I'm botching this. I'm sorry, it's late at night. So he said, that Jesus' heart of mercy flows into all who are lowly of spirit, just as water always flows into the low places. I thought that was a pretty great way of putting it. Not a ton to do with our lesson, but anyhow, so these guys are just looking for physical healing, and Jesus has an interesting response. He doesn't really offer any words of sympathy, and he doesn't even say like, "You are healed," you know. He says to them, "All right, go show yourselves to the priest." That's all he says. Now, as a good rabbi, he is drawing them out. He's kind of addressing their issue, both of them, their physical issue of leprosy, but at the same time, he's more trying to get to the heart of the issue and trying to see where their faith is at. And actually, they all went for it. You know, they obviously had faith to obey him, because the thing was he was telling them to go to the priests to show themselves to the priests. Basically, this was a part of Levitical law. When you had leprosy, if you were healed of your leprosy, if you were cured and your leprosy was gone, first thing to do was to show yourself to the priest, basically to prove it to him, so that he can declare you clean in the eyes of God, in the eyes of the community, and you could rejoin the community. So this was Jesus' way of saying, hey, go show yourselves to the priest because you're cleaned. He didn't say you're clean, but he just said go show yourselves to the priest. And you can imagine these guys having not necessarily been healed yet. It might have sounded weird, like, but we're not healed yet. Like, Jesus, you're sending us to the priest, but we're to be declared clean, but we are not clean yet, And you can imagine they're looking at their rotten flesh and wondering what's going on, but they still did it. So kudos to them for that. They still went forward with it, and what's amazing is you can imagine that as they stepped and as they walked, this was kind of a delayed healing, which is unusual for all the other healings that Jesus does. Usually he touches them, or he speaks to them, or all of a sudden he's like, and you are healed, and your faith has healed you, and daughter, rise up, and all this stuff. Lazarus, come out. And amazingly, his will is accomplished through his word, and that is wonderful and powerful. But in this one, all he says is, go show yourselves to the priest. And while they're walking, sometime later, sometime between him and Jerusalem, or I guess it didn't have to be Jerusalem, it could have been any nearby town that had a Levitical priest living in it. But regardless, there's obviously a time lag here between these guys leaving Jesus and going and finding a priest, and and now all of a sudden, as they're walking, they can feel their bodies getting stronger and healthier, and they're suddenly like, oh, hold on a minute, wait a minute, this is actually working. Oh my goodness, Jesus has healed us, and they're rejoicing, they're excited. I mean, we don't know what happened to the other 9, but I can imagine they went running home. I'm better. Probably ran straight to the priest. Look, I am healed. I'm clean. I can go home now. Very exciting time for them. But then there's just this one who comes back. And now, here's what I find amazing. I think, to me, when I read this story, I see, I'm going to use a weird term here, I see the transcendency of God's transcendency. What is transcendency? That's like a $5 word for you there. Transcendency means to rise above. It is that which rises above. It is higher. It's on a higher plane of existence. So we talk about God being transcendent in that he is above all other things. You can talk about things being transcendent. They transcend time. Some of the classic literature it transcends time and culture, in that these classics are valuable to people across multiple eras and multiple people groups, because they transcend. They speak more to the heart of humankind and not just to one specific kind of person. And so these are things that transcend. We know that God transcends things, right? He's above us all. We all know that he's better than us, that he is more perfect than we are, he's holier than we are. That's God. That's part of his nature. But I think that as I was saying, this speaks to the transcendency of God's transcendency, of Christ's transcendency. Meaning, we all are willing to assent that he is higher than we are, that he's on a higher plane than we are. But I feel like this story shows us, no. He's even on a higher plane than we even realize. It doesn't just stop with our expectations and our understandings of him. He's even higher than that. He transcends even our ideas of his transcendency. It's kind of this mind-blowing thing. And I'll give you some examples. I'll talk about it a little more. But the reason that this scripture makes me think of it is because you look at how he did this. Like I said, all other times he's using his word, which is amazing. I mean, first of all, if Jesus could have healed these men of leprosy with, medical technology, that still is just amazing. That's wonderful. That's great. Even if he used just normal, natural medical technology, excellent. That's really awesome. But then, if he were to use his words and say, be healed, your faith has healed you, as he did every other time, to enact power through words surely is a divine thing, right? However, to enact power simply through will alone, that's so much higher than anything we've ever seen and anything outside of God. And that's what Jesus did. He did not even have to use his words. All he had to do is just will that these men be healed. It's like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, his word is useless or his word is pointless. No. There is intense power in his word. I'm just saying it's amazing that he shows us in this instant that he's like, hey, look, I have power in my will alone. Who else can do that? No one. I can't just be like, I'm hungry, I'd like a ham and Swiss sandwich. And then all of a sudden it comes into existence. Only Christ can do that. Only God, eternal, can do that. And we see this. We see this concept blossoming in the mind of this one leper. And I'll kind of explain. I'm trying to organize my thoughts here. I'll give you some further examples of the transcendency of God. Okay, you realize that the beginning of the story in the Bible, the beginning of God's story, the story of the universe, it does not start off with, in the beginning God was born, or in the beginning God woke up, or in the beginning God sprang into being. It starts off with, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. God is just a character who's already on the scene, ready to take action. There's no further explanation. All we know is that God's there already, and that he created the heavens and the earth, aka everything else that has ever existed has been created by him, and he is the only thing who was not created by something else. And so this right there, he's there, and he's just kind of assumed. He's this assumption that all other truths stem from. If you want life, he's the originator of life. If you want love, guess what? Love flows from him. It begins with him. If you want truth, it starts right there in God's word. Only because he wills it, and only because he is transcendent above all. He's just there. He is. It's like he said to Moses. Moses is like, hey, what's your name? He says, I am. Kind of a weird name, but if you think about it, yeah, he just is. That's how transcendent he is. Now, going further, then we see what's his first act in creation. Oh, God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, there was morning, the first day. Okay. What's fascinating here is that you see that God created time in that moment. Well, when did he say time? Think about it. That was the first day. If there had been any time before that first day, then that day would not have been the first day. There would have been days before it. And one of those days would have been the first day. But this is the first day because there are no days before it. There has not existed time until this moment when God created time. Why do I say that? Because I say that time is not just some abstract framework within which everything exists. No, it is an abstract framework that God created within which everything that God created exists, but that he himself stands above. He's outside of it. We look at it and we're part of the timeline. I exist in this particular part of the timeline, and whether I want to or not, I'm moving forward at the same rate of speed as everything else, and then eventually, bloop, I'll pop out of the timeline. But God doesn't. He's above it all. He can enter it at all points at the same time. Think about his omnipresence. We say God is big. We have this idea, oh yeah, God's real big. He's much bigger than me. He fills the whole universe. But think about this. He doesn't just fill the universe. All of him fills every point in the universe. What? Think about me. Here I am. I am filling this chuck-shaped space in the universe right now. Okay? And I can't be anywhere else. I can't fill any other space, and nothing else can fill the space that I'm in. Cool. However, what's fascinating is when you break it down even further, look at this space right here. Only my pointer finger can fill this space. My eyeball can't fill that space. If I try, I'm going to end up poking myself in the eye. So, not all of me can occupy even the limited space that I do occupy. Only little bits and pieces of me can at a time, but yet God can take all of his infinite largeness and distill it all down and concentrate it, every single bit of him, into the space between a proton and a neutron, whatever that space may be, and he can put all of it in there, and indeed he does, and he puts all of himself in between all of them, and he fills every single point of space, and that is what omnipresence is. He is present everywhere, all the time, all of him. Whoa. Do you see? I can't even fully express it. I can't even fully understand it. I mean, if you think at any point that you can understand the attributes of God, I mean, try explaining the Trinity to a 5-year-old. It's really not going to work. I mean, try explaining the Trinity to a 25-year-old. Try explaining it to yourself. It's really difficult because we all have these little analogies that we like to talk about, but none of them work. Why? Because there is no perfect analogy to explain the Trinity of God, because there is no other. The Lord is our God. The Lord is one. He's the only one like himself. He transcends even our concepts of who he is. And I say this because I fear that this proportion here of the 10 lepers, there's the 9 that never gave thanks. And I fear that that's a pretty accurate proportion. You know, how many of us are going to Jesus and we know we're just looking at ourselves. oh my goodness, I'm messed up. I have issues. I am filthy and I need help. I need help from God. And that is wonderful. I think that's a great place to start. Absolutely. Every heart has to start somewhere. And like I said, Christ's heart of mercy is ready to flow into those lowly hearts. God, help me, save me. But I fear that 9 out of 10 of us stop there. Give me your blessings, God. Give me your healing. Solve my problems. And that's where we stop. Why? Because we forget about how God transcends our small ideas of him. We like to put him in our own tiny little box, our own little understanding of him, and say, wow, well, this is what I would be doing in that situation, so probably God's doing the same thing or thinking the same thing, or so probably God's cool with what I'm doing right now. And so often we tend to think too small of our infinite God. But then there's that one, when you start really dwelling on who God is, what does it do? It drives you to a heart of worship. He suddenly comes back, oh my word, Jesus, you surely are the Son of God. You are God himself who has come down, and not only are you this amazing, wonderful thing that is just like about to explode my brain with how huge and incredible and powerful you are, but you came down here to be like me, and you showed me mercy. I should be dead right now just for having even spoken to you, but yet you were kind enough to listen, and you were kind enough to heal me. Mind-blowing, right? I mean, like I said, I gave a couple of examples, and that only had to do with God's omnipresence. We didn't even touch his omnipotence or his omniscience, his all-seeing wisdom. We didn't talk about his omnibenevolence, his all-goodness. We didn't even talk about these things. And yet this God who is holy, who is separate from anything that we have ever understood or experienced, he still can have mercy on me. He still desired to set aside that divine nature. Being in very nature God, he humbled himself to the point of being a servant, even to the point of death. He became like me, and he suffered, and he died. He actually experienced death, only to rise again and cast death off, because obviously he's way more powerful than death. So when you see this, you begin to realize, you know what? Approaching God is about more than just solving my problems or getting what I want. Approaching God is about worshiping him with reverence and awe because of who he is, and because of the kindness he has showed me. Of course I'm going to have a heart of gratefulness. And you know what? Christ's response to this one was different. The other 9, they were healed of their leprosy, and that's great. Good for them. But that was it. This guy was healed of his leprosy, and his soul was saved. Jesus says to him, "Rise and go, your faith has made you well." That man had a true heart of worship because he understood the God that he was approaching. And I hope the same for us. I hope that we don't just put him into our little lamp to be our genie. Anytime we want something, God, I have another wish. So that's my message from the Bible this week. Hopefully there was a bit of a challenge in it. Love you all. See you soon. Bye.